Welcome, everyone, to a webinar entitled Abortion Pill Reversal, Truth or Fiction, with presenters Dr. Stephen Sammut and Dr. Stacy Trasankos. My name is Sebastian Mahfood, and I'm the director of ITEST. The Institute for Theological Encounter with Science and Technology, ITEST, is an association of theologians, scientists, and others committed to a Catholic worldview in which faith and science collaborate in exploring the truth. ITEST explores truth theologically in the wisdom traditions of the human community and in the data studied in the sciences. ITEST's mission is to foster and disseminate the Catholic position that science and faith in God are complementary paths to human fulfillment. Before I introduce our first presenter, Father Peter Stravinskas will offer an opening prayer. Father Peter?
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. First of all, this morning we pray for the repose of the soul of Dr. Alan Moy, a leader of the pro-life movement who established the John Paul II Medical Research Institute. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and may perpetual light shine upon him. May he rest in peace. May his soul and the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen. Direct, O Lord, all our thoughts, words, and actions by your holy inspiration, and carry them on by your gracious assistance, so that every prayer and work of ours may always begin from you, and by you be happily ended, through Christ our Lord. Amen. Our Lady, Seat of Wisdom, pray for us. St. John Henry Newman, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father Peter Stravinskas. Father Peter is Executive Director, in addition to being a wonderful prayer leader for us, of the Catholic Education Foundation. He will tell us about an upcoming conference, The Role of the Priest in Today's Catholic School. Father Peter?
Thanks, Sebastian, for this opportunity. Our seminar, this is our 10th anniversary of this seminar on the role of the priest in the Catholic school. And about 50 dioceses so far, and a number of religious orders have sent priests and bishops and seminarians to this institute every summer. This year it's being held from July 16th to the 18th in Cincinnati at the Diocesan Seminary. And the purpose for this institute is grounded in the realization demonstrated clearly by numerous studies over the past 5 decades that any Catholic school rises and falls on the involvement of a priest. That's particularly true of parish schools, but it's equally true of merged schools, regional schools, and Catholic high schools. And Cardinal Newman saw this very well. People think of Cardinal Newman, if they think of him in terms of education, it's always the university, and that's obviously true. But the apple of his eye was his oratory school, which exists to this day, and that was a K-12 school in which he and the other oratorians were intimately involved. And this institute is born of the fact that, unfortunately, with the exodus of literally hundreds of thousands of nuns from our school system in the 60s, and a very small number, unfortunately, of sisters in the education apostolate today, the role of the priest is more important today than it was 50 years ago. It's an institutional presence. It's a pastoral presence. And we bring together a wonderful team, largely of priest educators, with the idea that the priest making these presentations from his own experience precisely as a priest educator makes a particularly valuable contribution, but also a wider range of lay and women religious involved in the presentations. Topics like fostering the Catholic identity of the school, the spiritual life of the school, the omnipresent hovering of the financial issues, the hot button issues that we have to face today, looming large, thankfully, a number of states with school choice initiatives and how those should be viewed and promoted. So those are the topics that we're discussing. And if people, whether they're lay or not, if lay people want to push this project with priest or bishop friends of theirs, or to support it, it's $700 for the 3 days. If someone wants to be a sponsor for a priest or a seminarian, obviously that would be appreciated. Or any priests or bishops or seminarians who would be interested, we still have some room available. We keep it to a number of 35 altogether so that there's an opportunity for genuine interaction. We have priests from all over the country that come. It's a good opportunity to test the waters, what I'm doing here, what you're doing there. So there's a real sense of communication and solidarity in the education apostolate. So if people need further information, they can go to our website, catholiceducation.foundation, catholiceducation.foundation, or email me personally, Stravinskas, FSTRAV as in Victor, INSKAS @hotmail.com. All right. Thanks so much, Sebastian. And God bless you with this conference today, which is critically important.
All right. Thank you. And now I'm delighted to introduce our first presenter. Dr. Stephen Sammut received a B.Pharm from Monash University in Victoria, Australia, and a Ph.D. in neuroscience from the University of Malta in Malta, Europe. His research utilizes preclinical models to investigate psychopathological behavior. He has authored and co-authored papers in leading scientific journals, including his groundbreaking studies relating to abortion and abortion pill reversal. His research efforts currently focus on investigating 1. The neurological, biological, and behavioral consequences of drug-induced abortion. 2. The abortion pill reversal. 3. The development of an animal model for relocating the embryo in ectopic pregnancy. And 4. Mental health and related behaviors in the university student population. Dr. Sammut's presentation is entitled Abortion Pill Reversal, Preclinical Evidence. Dr. Sammut, take it away.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you the research that I have been conducting. I am going to start with addressing a number of aspects that lay the foundation to the research that I will be describing to you. So, first of all, we're going to start with the science. This aspect also describes the reasoning behind the conducting of the study. So, the rationale and the logic tells us that pregnancy is a normal physiological process. It involves significant hormonal changes. It also involves significant alterations to the body, and this takes place significantly through a system known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This system is so central to our behavior and to the way the brain functions. I'm not doing it justice in the words that I'm using here. However, it is important to keep in mind the centrality of this system. If we consider pregnancy as being a normal physiological process, then we need to also understand that terminating a viable pregnancy, and I emphasize here the word viable pregnancy, through a chemical or surgical means, which is an unnatural termination, would be expected to cause havoc in the body, realistically speaking, inducing a reactive physical change or physical changes and also behavioral changes. So we're all familiar with the debate that goes on out there with regards to abortion. It's a widely debated topic, and the consequences of it include mood disorders, anxiety, substance abuse, suicide, and depression. However, there's a bit of a problem in this regard. There's a lack of objective preclinical, physiological, and behavioral data. We have epidemiological and psychological studies that address these issues, but very often we see the pro-choice movement or people who believe that believe in the validity of abortion. We see people arguing that the results that are shown in these studies tend to be showing what they're showing because of either religious affiliation or personal beliefs, etc. That doesn't invalidate the findings of the study, but it creates a certain weakness in argument. Now, when it comes to preclinical physiological and behavioral data, as you're going to be seeing, this does not take place in surveys, through observation of people. This is in real experiments that take place at a preclinical level, and I'll explain that more as I go forward. It is interesting to note, as you see on the right-hand side of the screen, that label is the label of mifepristone on the mifepristone that I order for my experiments. It is interesting how the first warning is that it may damage fertility or the unborn child. So it really highlights the fact that it is well known that there is a child in the womb that can be endangered by the use of mifepristone. Another aspect to be kept in mind, I've already mentioned the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Well, hormones also play a significant role in this. So hormones are chemical signals, they're biologically active, and they are potent chemical signals. I want to emphasize that because when we look at the medical and scientific insanity that we are observing with regards to the puberty blockers, we're messing around with hormones. Now, anybody, any chemist, anybody that has studied hormones at any level, hopefully has been taught at some point or another of the potent efficacy and effect of hormones in their actions on the body. So they induce a significant cellular response, and hormones regulate everything: energy production, metabolism, growth and development, reproduction, responses to internal and external stimuli. Now, implicit in what I just said there is the fact that they actually modulate, alter the functioning of the brain through altering neurotransmitters, the chemicals that exist in the brain. They also alter the immune system. So hormones are very potent chemical signals. Again, an important foundational point that needs to be kept in mind going forward. Another aspect of importance is this concept of agonist and antagonist. This also plays a significant role in the arguments that are being made when people say, well, abortion pill reversal does not exist. Well, let's go through this concept of what an agonist and antagonist is. An agonist is the equivalent of a key that goes into a lock and opens that door. This key lock analogy is an important one. So what is an antagonist? An antagonist is something that blocks that keyhole, disabling the capacity of the agonist to act. Now, antagonists can be complicated, and I'm not going to go into the complexity, but it suffices to say that there are reversible, competitive antagonists, and irreversible, non-competitive antagonists. Now, a competitive antagonist can be displaced from the receptor, and you do this by administering a significant volume, significant amount of the agonist. So it's basically you flood the system with an agonist in order to displace, to remove what's blocking the receptor, the key lock, using that analogy. Now, this concept is really important in keeping in mind when we get to the abortion pill reversal. The pharmacology, I have no intention of going into all of this, but I wanted to point this out because I wanted to point out that when we talk about administering any drug for that matter, you're not really just speaking about, well, you took it and it has one effect somewhere. No, the impact of anything that we take into our body has multiple impacts. And sure enough, the same thing is the case when it comes to mifepristone and misoprostol, the two drugs that are utilized in abortion. The top pathway indicates the pharmacological pathway of the antiprogestin, RU486, mifepristone, and it has impacts on lactation, has impact on the capacity to give birth, and the mifepristone acts on the progesterone system, blocking it, in order to cause amniotic sac detachment. The prostaglandin effect, which is the second drug that is given in a chemical abortion, is misoprostol. And this drug causes contractions of the uterine muscles. So now moving on, let's take a quick review of what abortion is. There's chemically induced abortion or surgical abortion. Chemically induced is significantly more prevalent these days. And then abortion can also take place at various times in gestation, early term, midterm, and late term. And now we are hearing an aspect, and this preempts something I'm going to address later on. Because one thing inevitably that I had to do in preparing this presentation is address the reality of the lies that are being propagated within the medical and scientific community, the distortion and playing around with words that has taken place. So, for example, now we see, given that abortion has become a very acceptable term, instead of referring to infanticide, you will find scientific papers actually talking about post-birth abortion. These are little things that are taking place in the scientific and medical community that the lay person should still seek to be aware of, because otherwise people can speak to you in very complicated language, and you can very quickly forget or lose track of what's going on behind the scenes. So very important for us to be aware of the language war that is taking place. Now let's get back to chemically induced abortion, because that's what's going to be the focus of my talk. Two drugs are utilized in this, and that's mifepristone and misoprostol. I want to emphasize that mifepristone is not the morning after pill. It is amazing how many, even doctors, unfortunately, I've come across who will think that mifepristone, the abortion pill, is the same as the morning after pill. It certainly is not. Mifepristone, its chemical name RU486, gets its name from RU38486, which is the 38,486 compound that was synthesized between 1949 and 1980. Then it was shortened to RU486. Its actions are to detach the placenta from the uterus. This is how it kills the baby. It is a progesterone antagonist, so it blocks the receptor of progesterone. What is at the bottom of each of those two boxes is the politics behind what has taken place with regards to mifepristone, in regards to the FDA, and also the misoprostol with regards to the World Health Organization, that considers it as an essential medicine. So that I've described mifepristone. Now let's talk about misoprostol. Misoprostol was originally developed as a medication to prevent stomach ulcers. Now, as was indicated in the introduction, my undergraduate degree is in pharmacy, and I remember studying misoprostol for this purpose, but I also remember studying the fact that it was a category X, meaning it was known that it could harm the baby and therefore was contraindicated in prescribing when in the case of pregnant women. Misoprostol induces the contractions of the uterus, and the FDA removed the contraindication to pregnancy in 2002. It's a synthetic prostaglandin, and it acts as a prostaglandin agonist. So it stimulates the prostaglandin receptor, acts as the key in there. It mimics the prostaglandins that exist naturally in the body in order to cause the contractions. Moving on, another concept that I will be addressing is abortion pill reversal. So if the woman has taken the first abortion pill, there's still potential hope. It really is important for us to be propagating this message, because it amazes me at how many pro-life people themselves are not aware of this aspect. So what is abortion pill reversal? It involves the administration of progesterone, the agonist, which is naturally involved in maintaining the pregnancy, in order to displace the mifepristone, the abortion drug, from its binding site, and this leads to the abortion pill reversal. At a clinical level, Dr. George Delgado and Dr. Matthew Harrison are the two protagonists, the two people that initiated and have propagated this practice. Let's address a bit the politics. Important for you to know are the fact that there are documents that address the ethical treatment of people, ethical treatment of humans in research, or the ethical treatment of people just in general in the medical field. Starting with the Nuremberg Code that came out right after the Nuremberg trials of the Nazi doctors, included with regards to the atrocities that took place during the Second World War. Nuremberg Code is a simple document of about a page that outlines the important aspects that need to be kept in mind in the ethical treatment of human person. Then you have the Helsinki Declaration, which came around the end of the time when the Nuremberg trials were taking place and after. The Belmont Report. The Belmont Report is actually a beautiful document because it addresses the really important aspects with regards to what is important, the ethical treatment of human being, and makes reference also to the Hippocratic Oath of first do no harm. Then there's the Code of Federal Regulations. Now, just because there are ethical documents for the ethical treatment of human beings doesn't mean these are abided by, and it also doesn't mean that these are not modified to fit more political ideation rather than what is true ethical treatment of the human person. And this is very true of the Helsinki Declaration and the Code of Federal Regulations, as I will indicate in the next slide. So very quickly here, the Helsinki Declaration changed what the Nuremberg Code did, which was protect the rights of the patient and the subject, to focusing on protecting the rights of the physicians. That any document that continues to go numerous iterations needs to raise a red flag, because the iterations that are made, the changes that are made, are rarely for the better. They are usually for the removal of certain rights of the human person. The Code of Federal Regulations, especially subsection 45, section 45, subsection 46, in 2009 used to include among the vulnerable populations pregnant women. In the 2018 version, pregnant women were removed from that. And for a number of years, I have warned about the fact that this is indicative of the direction that our legislature is going to be going in terms of removing these protections from pregnant women in order to allow experimentation on pregnant women. And as such, we see the realization of this. This is a paper that was published a few weeks ago. The author of this paper is one of a number of authors that submitted a document of about 400 pages to Congress, seeking to ask Congress to develop incentives such as extended market exclusivity or tax breaks to encourage the conduct of clinical studies with pregnant and lactating women. If you think, lack of ethical treatment of human beings is a thing of the past, well, think again. These are recent studies that address the development of the utilization of grafted human aborted fetus tissue onto mice. That's studies conducted at Pittsburgh University. And then also on the other side, we see the mifepristone study and mifepristone antagonization that Trainer conducted. I will talk about this study later. This is also an unethical study that was conducted in this regard. We see ethics standards that are duplicitous. It's okay, you see on the left-hand side, for a person to have personal fees from Danco Laboratories, which is the distributor of mifepristone, and that's not considered a conflict of interest of serious consideration just because it is declared. But that really indicates that a person should take with a pinch of salt anything that is said in that paper. Yet on the other hand, they have issues with and retract a paper by Dr. Priscilla Coleman, based on undisclosed competing interests, which were not competing interests whatsoever. So unfortunately, the scientific community, the academic community, has truly become polluted with these politics. And the reason I say this, because many people will say, well, of course, we knew that this was the case. Well, if one takes a moment to look back on the past 4 years with regards to what had taken place in regards to COVID, it really begs the question, do people really understand and comprehend the corruption that has taken place in academia? I think it is important for us to be able to show the reality of what is going on. You have the DEI or critical theory version on the left-hand side, which laments health disparities apparently and structural racism. But realistically speaking, are we talking about that, or are we really talking about systematic eugenic ideation? And if you look at the tables that are available and the data that is available, since the availability of abortion, since abortion was made available, the Black community, for example, has always, on average, at least 3 to 1 more abortions in the Black community relative to the white community. This is the reality of the medical field right in front of you. The first paper at the top addresses the administration of potassium chloride in order to induce feticide, killing the baby, with 100% success. I mean, really, this is medicine. This is the first do no harm. And notice the playing with words that I addressed earlier on. Human parturition, meaning giving birth, being addressed as nothing more than a delayed menstruation. Why? Because if you play with those kinds of words, if you call giving birth nothing more than a delayed menstruation, then you justify what is on the other paper, the aspect of the missed period pill. Then you can just administer the missed period pill when you have a woman in front of you that doesn't want her pregnancy, when in actual fact the missed period pill is nothing more than mifepristone, exactly the same doses as the abortion drug. This, in fact, at a legislative level, has been abused in places like Bangladesh, for example, where abortion is illegal if you know that you're pregnant. If you don't know that you're pregnant, if you haven't done a pregnancy test or haven't had an ultrasound, you can be administered the missed period pill. At the moment you know that you are pregnant, then it's illegal to have an abortion. So you can see how playing with words can modify legislation and laws, and not just in this country, anywhere. So APR, abortion per reversal, why the antagonism to all of this? Even the author themselves addresses mifepristone as a reversible anti-hormonal activity of an anti-hormone. So what do we know? We know that mifepristone is a progesterone antagonist. We know it binds more strongly to the progesterone receptor than progesterone itself. We also know that it binds competitively. Now, that aspect is really important because anybody that has studied any chemistry will know that if it is a competitive, reversible antagonist, it can be displaced from its receptor. So, keeping that aspect in mind, it is important to realize that when Mitch Crane, in the study, the unethical study that I will address soon as well, that I mentioned earlier also, addresses in the title of that paper should have been rejected the moment it was seen, because he says mifepristone antagonization with progesterone. You can't have that. That's chemically impossible. Mifepristone is the antagonist. Progesterone is the agonist. So mifepristone is the one that's doing the antagonization, not progesterone. Progesterone is the natural hormone that should be bound to that receptor in order to maintain the pregnancy. So reversible, when we talk about this, despite the mockery that is made even of Dr. Delgado and Harrison, because they use this term, and anybody that uses this term, is actually the correct term. So why the antagonism? Again, we continue. You see the lamentation expressed in a number of papers here by the Garrett and Turner group, addressing the fact how, and this is a quote, disparaging the case report of an abortion pill reversal, that is, as an anti-abortion effort to dress up political aims as sciences without basis in the professional discourtesy. It certainly is. I go as far as saying it is a crime against humanity, because you are preventing the woman. If you go back to Nuremberg Code and the Belmont Report, you will see that you are preventing the woman from understanding totally and fully what is available to her, what the possibilities that are available to her. So you're reducing, as the Belmont Report addresses, the aspect of autonomy. I myself have had issues in this regard when we submitted the abortion per reversal, which I'll address a bit later. Was initially rejected in the Frontiers in Endocrinology on the base after it was accepted by 2 reviewers and the handling editor, on the basis that it did not meet the criteria of the journal. Now, the criteria of the journal are checked at the beginning of a review process, not at the end, which is where this paper was at. When I demanded from the editors a response clarification, because I did not believe what they said as being sufficient, this was a response, and I quote, lastly, the manuscript might be interpreted as supporting the notion of a pharmacological reversal of induced pregnancy termination in humans, a concept which, in line with the recent statement by ACOG and RCOG, these are the two major organizations in the US and the UK, cannot be supported. So what this is, they're telling me basically here is, it's the politics that matters. It's what organizations say. It's not the science that matters. So I need to explain to you very quickly the model that I use. I utilize animals, I utilize rats. The animal models date back centuries. They're also independent of potential social, moral, and other influences. I know I say this at every talk, but I do have to say it. It doesn't really matter how much holy water and catechism I read to these rats, or how much holy water I use on them. It's not going to make them Catholic. What is important in these situations is the setup of the experiment, which needs to be solid. So there is no social influence, there is no moral influence in regards to the results that we observe. Animal models are established preclinical models for investigating human psychopathology, and I have investigated numerous other diseases in this regard. But it needs to also be understood that no animal model is a perfect replication of the clinical model. That's really important to keep in mind. Now, you don't just wake up one morning and talk about, come up with an animal model. There's internal and external validity. Internal validity is dependent on how I set up the experiment, how I conduct the experiment, etc., the groups that I choose. So that's really important on the integrity of the experiment based on how I behave in a way. The external validity aspect refers to how much it replicates and reflects what is observed in humans. So very quickly, let me use Parkinson's disease here because most of you will probably be familiar with this as an example. Construct validity refers to the etiological aspect. So in humans, we know that Parkinson's disease is associated with a deficiency in dopamine release in the dopaminergic system. So if I'm having a model of Parkinson's disease in the rat, then I need to see a deficiency in the dopaminergic system. Face validity is symptomological. Parkinson's disease has motor movement disorder. So I would expect to see similarities in a rat model. Predictive validity refers to the therapeutic aspect, meaning that if I give a dopaminergic agent to a human in order to overcome the symptoms of Parkinson's disease, then I should be able to do the same in an animal model in order to alleviate the symptoms there. This is the first paper that we published pertaining to the negative consequences of abortion. It is freely available online. It's also available on our website, and also we have executive summaries for that. And here's a summary of it. There's much more that I could describe, but that's not the purpose of this presentation. But I need to give you this as a foundation for what we utilize for the abortion pill reversal study and what we're going to use as well in the upcoming experiments. So in regards to so on the left, you see the measure that we utilized. On the right, far right, you see the interpretation. In the middle is additional detail pertaining to each of those measures. So in terms of body weight and food intake, rat body weight and food intake, we see a reduction. And these are established measures of overall well-being. So we see a reduction in overall well-being in the rats that have the abortion. Okay, keep in mind that's what I'm talking about here. Vaginal impedance, which is a measure of fertility, here we saw a reduction in fertility. In regards to sucrose consumption and locomotor activity, and as I said, if anybody wants more details in terms of what these mean and how and why, please feel free to contact me. The decrease in sucrose consumption and locomotor activity is indicative of what we call an anhedonic effect. This is a depression-like behavior. The corner activity and the reduction that we observed there was indicative of anxiety-like behavior. And then the biochemical observations that we observed indicated a long-term oxidative stress. So the abortion study conclusions indicated that mifepristone-induced pregnancy termination induces a moderate to severe stress, resulting in depression and anxiety-like behaviors. I want to just make a note here that these conclusions are not based on things that I concocted. All I did was utilize established methodologies of measurement and apply them to the question that I was asking. So I want to make that emphasis, I want to emphasize that aspect. So moderate to severe stress, depression-like and anxiety-like behaviors. We saw negative effects extending beyond the point of application of the stressor. This is interesting because it contrasts significantly to what is in the literature, where people generally observe the stress only during the application of the stressor. We observed it for several days afterwards. It's a long-term effect. Red time is not human time. Some of those effects that, lasting approximately is approximately 7 days. I missed the number 7 there. Is equivalent to approximately 244 human days. In 70 days, which was the biochemical measurements that we made, that's equivalent in the human of about 6.5 human years. We saw a negative impact on fertility, and we saw prolonged physiological changes. Analyzing all of this information indicated that abortion was the primary significant predictor of the negative behaviors that we observed. So now let's go into the abortion pill reversal aspect. Is there such a thing as abortion regret? Absolutely, the literature indicates it. You see plenty of websites that address this aspect, and realistically speaking, as I show on the right, there are even the papers that argue that abortion regret doesn't exist, and one had to look closely at their statistics, which are not 100% on one side, which indicates that there's a certain percentage of women that do regret. Of course, this is not admitted. We believe that there are certain statistics that show that more than 4,000 lives have been saved through abortion pill reversal. There's also literature addressing this, primarily by Dr. George Delgado and also the group in Australia, the Turner group in Australia. These are papers that address suggested protocols, case reports of women that they have observed. Remember that progesterone didn't just start being used for this. Progesterone has been utilized for a number of years, many years, in order to maintain pregnancy in situations where women were not able to maintain their pregnancy. And then the paper at the bottom actually addresses the success rate, let's call it that, of mifepristone, how efficacious it is in inducing fetal demise and inducing death in the fetus. Why is this important? Why is this being addressed here? Because you need to make sure that if you are administering progesterone and seeing survival, that survival is not because mifepristone failed to act. So it is important to understand and comprehend the success rate of fetal demise by mifepristone. That's why it's addressed here. This is the Turner group looking at the progesterone being low risk in early pregnancy, and also another paper by Delgado addressing safety and efficacy of progesterone administration and some information pertaining to some reasonable protocols. We also have unethical research. I mentioned the Cranen study. So this study basically, in short, had 40 women involved, and 20 of those women were, 40 of all women were administered the mifepristone, the abortion drug. But 20 women were administered progesterone, 20 women were given a sugar pill. The goal of the study was solely to seek to disprove the reality of abortion pill reversal. Well, the study actually had to be terminated because of safety, they called it, on the NIH website. And this was because of a number of negative responses involving significant bleeding that took place in the subjects. Interestingly, and this is, I want to emphasize, this is not statistically significant. It is important to note that the greatest amount of negative effects was in the women that were not administered progesterone. So again, it's not significant, but worthy of note. Progesterone group had the less negative effects. This is the paper we published recently. It is also available freely online. We published this last year, addressing the abortion pill reversal in an animal model. There's previous work addressing abortion pill reversal, or really it was not seeking to address that. But the closest that there was a Yamabe paper back in 1989, where progesterone and mifepristone were co-administered, given together, where this is a flaw. So I'll address that aspect in a second. This project, what our goal was to create a model of progesterone-mediated reversal, so being able to reverse the abortion with utilizing the progesterone. Important to also note that, of course, like in anything, we also seek ethical approval. I'm not going to go over the top part, that's information pertaining to the abortion study. However, we utilize that as our guide. We created that model in order to have other for the models going forward to be built on it. The criteria that we addressed or that we utilized for the study are very important to note. We looked at, in terms of pregnancy termination, we utilized the same criteria as the abortion study, and this is in regards to bleeding and loss of weight. Now, I want to indicate that the loss of weight that we saw in the rats, that I said is an indicator of negative health, it is not simply associated with the loss of the pregnancy. It is associated with a depression-like behavior. The evidence of this is we had a group of rats, which this is data I did not show, that miscarried, and that group did not show the same behavior as the abortion group. And the reason for this, they did not show negative depression-like behaviors. The reason for that is because in the rats, you are not measuring what they feel about it many years later. You're looking at purely physiological response, and a natural miscarriage is, as the name implies, a natural miscarriage, and the body is compensating for it. Now, moving on, the reversal group needed to show similarity to the pregnancy termination, meaning that we wanted to see bleeding and weight loss in the reversal group. We wanted to see this in order to ensure that there can be no argument that the abortion had started, which was not what Yamabe was able to show because of the point in time where they collected the data, which was very early on in the pregnancy. And then the reversal process needed to show a regaining of weight and the continued growth. So we faced numerous challenges. Vehicle, route of administration. Vehicle is the compound that's going to carry the drug. And this is the compound, the chemical that is injected in the rats that are in the control group. Okay, so dosing and number of administrations, timing and administration. Keep in mind, the rat's life is compressed. Induction of birth, nursing, these are aspects that we either have faced or are facing and we are addressing. And here are our results. So let me go through this, let me break this down for you. So first of all, here, I'm not sure, I hope that you are able to see my mouse. If you are not, I'm referring to the dark circle. That dark circle reflects the group that was pregnant and remained pregnant. Okay, then we have I'm going to move on to the abortion group. And the abortion group down here is the group that was pregnant initially, received mifepristone, but was not administered progesterone. The orange here, the orange circles, these are the reversal group. So this group showed a decrease in weight initially after the administration of mifepristone, but because we had also given it the progesterone, then we see a regaining in weight. So in short, again, to summarize, the abortion group showed weight loss that continued through the end of gestation. The reversal group showed an initial reduction in body weight and then resumed gaining weight. And the unsuccessful reversal group, because we did have some of those, and we admit this in the paper, it was similar to the abortion group. We also measured uterine bleeding. We administered tampons, if you want to call them that. These are little cotton pieces of cotton, of standardized pieces of cotton that we utilized in order to collect blood from vaginal blood. The control measures, we compared the abortion group to the reversal group. These are the two groups that had bleeding. Those were the only two groups that we could conduct the study on. The control measures were not different between the two groups, which is what one would hope for. We then also looked at blood loss, the level of blood loss that was observed, and the blood loss was the same in the two groups. Now, this may sound alarming to people, but it's not alarming to me. This wasn't alarming to us because, as I said, this was indicative that the abortion had started. There is no question about it. We measured ultrasound and fetal heart rate through the ultrasound. I'm not sure how well you can see the images. You can see the head, the spine. In some cases, you see the empty uterus on the right-hand side. There was no significant difference in the heart rate between the two fetuses. The two groups of fetuses, those in the reversal group, those in the normal pregnancy group. We looked at uterine weights, uterine diameter, and approximate fetal weight. And again, there was no significant difference between the uterine weights because we collected this tissue at the end of gestation. Because of the complexity of the compressed life of the rat and the complexity of the birth process and also the nursing aspect, and this, when I'm talking about the complexity, I'm talking about the chemical complexity, the regulation of progesterone of these two processes. These were aspects that we need to figure out in greater detail, but we collected the tissue, the uteri, at the end of gestation in order to make these measurements. And what we observed was the uterine weights were not different between the abortion group between the abortion pill reversal group and the pregnancy group, normal pregnancy group. Uterine diameter also was not different between the two groups, indicative that the fetuses were approximately the same size, and that was also further confirmed with the approximate fetal weight, where there was no significant difference between the reversal group and the normal pregnancy group. The group that lost their pregnancy, even though we administered progesterone, so this is the unsuccessful reversal, that group was the parameters were similar to those of the abortion group. So, summary of the observations. The abortion group and the reversal group both saw an initiation of the abortion. The abortion group showed complete pregnancy termination, evident in the continued weight loss and the absence of fetuses at the end of gestation. The reversal group showed a termination initiation, and then this was reversed. And this was evident in the resumption of weight gain at a similar rate as those of the normal pregnancy, and also the presence of fetuses at the end of gestation. The unsuccessful reversal group was similar to the abortion group, and also the reversal group, the fetal heart rate, uterine weight, uterine diameter, and approximate fetal weight was comparable to that of a normal pregnancy group. So what are the conclusions of this? The study addresses clearly the successful reversal of an initiated mifepristone-induced abortion. Progesterone reverses the effects of mifepristone. At the end of gestation, successful reversal group, the reversal group, was comparable to the normal pregnancy group and not to the abortion group. So even though they went through a similar period that was similar to the abortion group, but the progesterone administration made them similar to the normal pregnancy group. Living offspring were present at the end of gestation in a majority, about 81.3% of rats, in the reversal group, compared to 100% fetal demise in the abortion group. So clearly this is a reversal situation, despite the fact that even reviewers kept on arguing that you can't call this a reversal. I'm not sure what else objectively you can call a process where you're observing such a contrast in response. So the findings appear to support the clinical observations The findings also support the clinical use of progesterone in order to reverse the mifepristone-induced abortion. Of course, further research is necessary. So, people may look at me sometimes and say, well, he's doing all of this in rats. What does it matter? How can we even use it? It can be used, and I really pray and hope that people do use it. And this is why, after all, we do it. Our study was recently used, for example, in a court arguing against the banning of abortion in Colorado, Senate Bill 23190, which resulted, at least for now, in overturning. This is the kind of objective data, and it wasn't the only study, I want to make that clear, but this is the kind of places where this work, can be utilized because there can be no argument. If the experiment is done right, this is objective data, although objectivity these days has also come into question in this politically correct society that we live in. However, this is objective data that can't be argued against, realistically speaking. Our current work continues to investigate the birth process and development of the offspring. We address the health of the mother, the reversal versus the normal pregnancy. We want to make sure of the similarities. There's various other tests that we are conducting. What you're seeing on the right, that's a rat uterus. It's V-shaped. It's called bicornuate. Each of those spots indicates a place where a placenta used to be. They're called placental scars, and this is a zoomed in, the bottom right is a zoomed in image of that uterus. So what's the future direction of our studies? We want to seek to work on improving the abortion reversal methodology. We do this also in collaboration and discussion with Dr. Delgado and others. We want to investigate neurophysiology and neurochemistry, understanding the brain. If we're seeing depression-like and anxiety-like behaviors in these situations, then clearly there are changes that take place in the brain, and these can be measured, and we have ways of measuring these. And also looking at other relevant behaviors that are observed in humans. So, for example, given the neurological effects of abortion, is there a correlation, or is there a correlation to the substance abuse that we observe in humans that is associated or correlated with people that have had an abortion? So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope I was clear in my description. I want to express my gratitude to the Steno Institute, the Watson-Bass Research Institute, and TSC, all of which have supported this research significantly. The many private donors without whom this research would not have been possible at all. I want to also thank my current research assistant, Christina Camilleri, and also other students and assistants that I have had in the past who have assisted intermittently with these studies. And what you see on the right, that's a multitasking mother. She is nursing while eating. They are cute rats, you have to admit. This is my contact information. As I said, this research is made possible solely through the generosity of private donors, and your support is very much appreciated. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Sammut, for your presentation. And now I'm pleased to introduce our second presenter. Stacy Trasenkos has a Ph.D. in chemistry from Penn State University and worked as a senior research chemist for DuPont before converting to Catholicism. She left her career to stay home with her children. In those years, she earned an MA in dogmatic theology and published 5 books on the integration of science and theology. Dr. Trasenkos teaches online science and theology courses for Seton Hall University, Holy Apostles College and Seminary, and Belmont Abbey College, and is a fellow of the Word on Fire Institute. She is, at last, pursuing a second MA in systematic philosophy. Dr. Trasenkos' presentation is entitled From Blue Genes to Vaccines, the Conscience of an Abortifacient World.
Thank you, everyone, for being here on a Saturday morning and for making time to hear these talks. And thank you, Sebastian, for the introduction and for writing the title of my talk, because I was drawing the blank, and I love it. this talk should dovetail nicely with the one you heard from Dr. Sammut. Just kind of broadening out on the issue of all that happens regarding abortion in our society that we may not even know about. My area that I investigate with my husband and our nonprofit organization, Children of God for Life, is the use of aborted children in medical research. So I want to focus on that, but in the same kind of light about things that are happening because abortion is legal and that we may not know about, things that we need to keep up with. The abortion industry naturally exploits the narrative by politicizing. Let me back up. Yeah, there we go. So this language from Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1992, at the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, meaning the universe and the mystery of human life. Beliefs about these matters could not define the attributes of personhood were they formed under compulsion of the state. So that language kind of said that we're free to come up with our own definition of what it means to be human. And today we don't really have people in our society making decisions who understand what being human is, body and rational soul composite made in the image and likeness of God. And they therefore don't understand human dignity. And all kinds of things fall out from that. The abortion industry exploits this narrative, politicizes it, and contradicts itself, because at the very core of the abortion industry is to deny the human rights that they say they're protecting. At the heart of these politics is an anti-personhood agenda that counts on the complicity of pro-life advocates. And that's why we have to stay involved. We have to stay educated about what's going on, because otherwise, unwillingly, unwittingly, we become complicit. That has been my concern with fetal tissue research. Such a shaky moral landscape became apparent, as we all know, during the COVID days 4 years ago. And there were prominent Catholic leaders, bioethicists, theologians, and even people in the church and at the Vatican promoting, under the principle of double effect, this immoral, the use of immorally created vaccines as morally illicit. So I want to focus on that a little bit. It applies to a lot of things, not just vaccines. So here's a breakdown. Here's how I have it pictured in my mind. I think this is helpful. A lot of people in those days were asking my husband and I, what do you mean? What does that mean? Licit cooperation and evil. What does that mean? Remote licit cooperation and evil. How does the remoteness make it okay? How can you licitly cooperate in evil? So this is a confusing term. Well, cooperation can have two different forms. It can be formal cooperation or material cooperation. Formal cooperation in evil is always intentional. This would be the abortionist who opens the clinic, practices how to do abortion, picks up the tools, takes the money, kills the baby. That is formal cooperation in evil, and it's intentional. Material cooperation can be unintentional, and it can be immediate or mediate. So in this case, those words mean something in the middle or something not in the middle. Immediate has nothing in the middle. So it's direct contact. These would be the people who work in the abortion clinic, or maybe the person who drives someone to the abortion clinic. You're materially in contact with the material. You're involved, but you're not formally involved. You're not intending to be involved, but you're directly involved. Mediate means you're not directly involved. It's an indirect involvement. So we're moving away from cooperation. Immediate material cooperation is always proximate because there's nothing in the middle. Mediate material cooperation can be proximate or remote. Proximate means that you're closer to the cooperation. Remote just means you're further away from the cooperation. And so when the Pontifical Academy for Life said, they actually said passive, remote, mediate, material cooperation in evil is licit. But they didn't stop there. That if you read the paper from 2005, they said it's licit if the situation is grave. And if you have, there's three parts to it. If the situation is grave, and if you have no other choice, and if you must keep fighting to end the evil that you're cooperating in, that you don't want to be cooperating in. So that is where my husband and I kind of seized on this problem with the situation with what Catholics are to do out here trying to live our lives. What do we do? So we have a grave responsibility if we're going to licitly, remotely, passively, immediately, materially cooperate in evil. What does that mean? Well, first of all, let me, before I move away from the slide, I do want to clarify who we're talking about here. So in the red, I tried to color code it. In the red, that would be the abortionists, the people doing the abortion. It would even be people doing research with the aborted children. So that might be immediate material cooperation, where the researcher in the lab didn't will the abortion, didn't conduct the abortion, but nevertheless exploited the dead body or the corpse to use it in his research or her research. There's also the people not formally cooperating, but materially cooperating, who are marketing the pharmaceuticals, who are supporting the funding for the pharmaceuticals. Further out on the chain, but not as far out as parents, I would put doctors, okay? Doctors, medical doctors. And if you're a parent who's ever had to go through the vaccination of your children, you know what I'm talking about. Medical doctors are the ones that the parents talk to in the doctor's office. And when you say to them, I only want ethically sourced medications, whether it's vaccines or anything else, the doctor oftentimes can't really do anything about it, but they could make better choices. They could fight the issue better than the parents can. And sometimes they will, and sometimes they won't. So I would say they have more responsibility. So what are the ethical guidelines then? So this is the 2005 document from Pontifical Academy for Life. It says there is a grave responsibility to use alternative medicines, vaccines, and to make a conscientious objection with regard to those which have a moral problem, meaning they were developed or produced with aborted children's corpses. As regards the vaccines without an alternative, that's the situation we had with COVID vaccines. There was no alternative. The need to contest so that others may be prepared must be reaffirmed. And that's what my husband and I and others like us were doing. We were contesting that. We weren't disagreeing with the Vatican or the bishops. We were saying, don't stop there. You can't just say, hold your nose and use the vaccine. You also we're supposed to be protesting this for the future. I don't want my children to have to go through this. I want them not to have to make these decisions about remote licit cooperation and evil, as should the lawfulness of using the former in the meantime, in so much as it is necessary in order to avoid a serious risk, not only for one's own children, but also and perhaps more specifically the community. So if you don't get vaccinated, there's a belief that the whole community could suffer if there is an outbreak, and that's true. And so that goes into your discernment about whether to get the vaccine or not. The lawfulness and use of these vaccines should not be misinterpreted as supporting abortion. It is understood as being a passive material cooperation. That's where that language is. And in its mildest and remotest sense, some people were saying very, very, very remote. Also active, morally justified as an extrema ratio due to the necessity to provide for the good of one's own children. So this document was referring to the rubella vaccine. There are now, and this was back in 2005, there are other vaccines that are used. Children now, my husband counted it up, before the age of 18, children are expected to receive 199 different shots, vaccines. if you count flu shots every year and now COVID shots every year and all the other booster shots and everything, 100 times, almost 100 times they get stabbed with a needle. So this document was referring to the rubella, but it can be applied to any other medication, not just vaccines. The lawfulness should not be misinterpreted as saying it's okay. But that's exactly what happens, because people get their children vaccinated, or people take the COVID vaccines and the boosters, and they say, I have an objection to this practice, but there's a grave need. I'm going to go ahead and take the shot. That's allowed, licit, but then they stop. There's no protesting. There's no demand from the pharmaceutical companies. It's behind you now, and you don't have to do anything. And so we're trying to keep that conversation alive. And also, when you cooperate, we should never be complacent about it. It is a moral coercion of the conscience. If you are, the way I looked at it, it's like you're backed into a corner. And during COVID, that's where we were. We were backed into a corner. You need to get a vaccine if you decide. I mean, that is debatable, I know. But let's say you've decided you need to get the vaccine for whatever reason. It's a grave need. And you have no other choice but to use one developed with abortion, and you oppose abortion. Well, you are backed into a corner. You've got a really hard decision to make. And a lot of people did have to make hard decisions. A lot of people said, I don't want anything to do with that vaccine, yet they lost their jobs, or they lost educational opportunities, or they lost time with family who wouldn't let them around. That is a hard place to be in. And we're never going to get out of that spot if we don't keep protesting this practice. Cooperation and evil and scandal. This wasn't mentioned a whole lot during the 4 years ago, the COVID mess, but the Vatican has also been very clear that we can't give the appearance of cooperating, even though we're remote, licit cooperation and evil, we can't give the appearance of being okay with it, because that could cause scandal. And there were two different documents that had specific language on this. All of this gives rise to ethical problems with regard to cooperation and evil and scandal. Furthermore, the moral requirements must be safeguarded, that there be no complicity in deliberate abortion, and that the risk of scandal be avoided. So, like, if you're I've had college students contact me. They find out they're using a cell line derived from an aborted child, and they have to take a stand. They have to stand up to their college. Some of them were Catholic colleges, and say, I'm not going to be a part of this. Because if the student just did nothing, said nothing, used those materials, then at some point there is a risk of scandal. It is a risk of scandal, flat out is. In reality, the duty to avoid cooperation and evil and scandal relates to ordinary professional activities. And so we are supposed to oppose gravely unjust laws. So that's where scandal is mentioned. Last slide with Vatican documents. How are we to treat them? So there's a problem here that I think we all need to put our heads together and think about. What do we do then? Okay, how is one to morally evaluate research and experimentation on human embryos and fetuses? The corpses, whether they have been deliberately aborted or not, must be respected just as the remains of other human beings. Okay, if you have a miscarriage, you know what to do there. You need to honor that child and bury that child. In particular, though, so with abortion, nobody's going to do that, right? The mother consented to having the child killed. In particular, they cannot be subjected to mutilation, so that would refer to the research, or to autopsies if their death has not yet been verified and without consent of the parents or the mother. But this sentence doesn't really apply to aborted fetal tissue research, because, okay, so they can't be subjected to mutilation or autopsies. You don't need to do that if there was an abortion, because you know what the cause of death is. If their death has not yet been verified, so obviously you can't use their body parts if they're still alive, and without the consent of the parents. But the argument is, if the mother has consented to kill the child, the mother has no moral authority to consent for the child's body to be used in medical research. Furthermore, the moral requirements must be safeguarded, that there be no complicity in deliberate abortion, again, that's the same language, the risk of scandal be avoided. But in the case of dead fetuses, as for the corpses of adult persons, all commercial trafficking must be considered illicit and should be prohibited. So there's strong language there, no trafficking of the body parts. Of course, the culture gets around that, researchers get around that by saying there's no trafficking, there was only donation. I've talked to Abby Johnson about this, who used to work at Planned Parenthood. That is one way they used to talk women into abortion. You can donate the body of your baby to medical research, and some good will come from this decision. They say that to women. Okay, real quick, and this is, I don't want to go too long here. I'm just going to blast through some of these slides to show you what happens in culture in the research community when we're not paying attention. This is polio research from 1952. They took the human embryos, so they weren't really embryos, of one half to 5 months gestation. That would be a fetus that fully formed. They were taking them from the mother with the heart still beating when they were received into the virus laboratory to isolate the polio virus from these children. So that happened, and that's clearly wrong. And also 1952, this research won a Nobel Prize. Also in 1952, they talk about how the embryo was removed from the amniotic sac under sterile conditions and dissected 1 to 3 hours after hysterotomy. A hysterotomy is when you do a hysterectomy and you take the child from the mother's womb, but not with the intent of keeping it alive, the intent of killing it. Other vaccines have been developed using fetuses, the rubella, which I mentioned already, and the COVID vaccines were all either grown or tested with aborted fetal cell lines. Dr. Leonard Hayflick, my husband and I have spoken with him for about 4 hours, getting into the details of this. He's in his 80s now, and he didn't want to be seen as a monster, does not want to be remembered as a monster. And I think it's useful for us to look at things through his eyes. He developed the oldest and the most used aborted fetal cell line. He put his hands on the corpse of the aborted child, cut up the organs, and isolated the cell line that is used now from 1960 to 2015. An estimated 10.3 million deaths were averted globally from 4.6 billion doses. And so he said to me, so he says, I'm not Catholic. I don't go by these ethical guidelines that you do. He says, but I'm a doctor and I'm trying to cure people. And it wasn't my fault the baby was aborted. It wasn't I didn't do the abortion. I didn't will the abortion, but there is a corpse. There is a specimen and it's in front of me. And I need a specimen from that kidney that's about the size of a matchstick head. I think he needed more than that. But anyway, he needed some of the tissue. And he says, taking that little sample from this body, this corpse, it's not a body, it's a corpse, taking a little sample from this corpse that was on the way to the incinerator anyway, saved estimated 10.3 million deaths. What would you have had me do? That's what he said to me. What would you have had me do? And what you should have buried the baby. And he says, well, if I'd have buried the baby, then I couldn't have developed the vaccines that saved all these lives. And that is the heart of the ethical question, in my opinion. What would you have me do? These are all the other fetal cell lines. We have them on our website, Children of God for Life. It's COG4FOR life, life.org. Parkinson's research in 2020 talks about using fetal cells taken from an aborted child and implanted into the brains of people with Parkinson's disease, because those young cells might grow I think it was the glial cells in the brain and restore youthfulness to the Parkinson's patients. Parkinson's disease, here's another description from 1990. So this research has been going on for decades. They take the brain tissue out of the aborted child, and the time between abortion and implanting it into the Parkinson's patient was 2.5 to 4 hours. This is a project in 2020 that was reported. They used 249 aborted corpses in California, and they were simply testing flame retardant chemicals. PBDE is a flame retardant chemical in furniture, carpet, clothing. They wanted to know if it builds up in the child in the womb. And so they used bodies of children who were unwanted and killed by abortion to test and see if it was, and they found out there were higher levels of the flame retardant. So it does concentrate in the unborn child. Cancer research, they use, since Down syndrome babies are aborted so much, Down syndrome children have a higher risk of leukemia. This is known and observed. Yet the Down syndrome children who get leukemia as infants recover from it. So there's some mechanism that's causing them to recover. And so to study this, to be able to help, I say it like this, using the unwanted children to figure out how to help cure the wanted children, they conducted this research with aborted Down syndrome children. And one of the ones I found back in 2015 blew my mind, happened in the 1970s, these in vivo experiments where they did hysterotomies, meaning the mother was sedated, unconscious. They cut open the womb. These were women who were having abortions. They cut open the womb. They took the child out of the womb, left the umbilical cord still attached to the mother, injected amino acids into the umbilical cord, and literally held the child for 10 minutes to 30 minutes and waited for the child's body to process the amino acids before they killed the child and dissected the organs and tested them. They wanted to know in premature infants what kind of amino acids need to be, are essential to be included in infant formula. This was research for infant formula. Staph infections, 2020 at Pittsburgh, they just wanted to test, they wanted to see, not even testing anything, just wanted to see if they could grow, if they could take skin from an aborted child, the head, the scalp, and the back, implant it onto a rodent, a mouse or a rat, and see if it would grow. And then what they wanted to do with these humanized mice was give the human skin patch a staph infection so that they would be able to test and see if they had medicines that would cure staph infections. So they literally scalped the corpses, cut skin off the back, grafted them onto rodents, and their success was reported because those brown patches of hair growing over on the right are the baby's hair that grew from the scalp that was grafted onto the rodent. And then they were able to give a staph infection to that patch, and so it was reported as successful. The Human Fetal Cell Atlas. Human Fetal Cell Atlas, this should give us all pause. This was also reported, and it's going on now. It's a big deal. They are trying to understand how a zygote goes to a fully formed human. It's a huge mystery of life there. How does the zygote go to a fully formed human? Well, they have the ability now to take individual cells from different organs and do a single cell gene expression profile where they can tell the entire the entire nucleic acid sequence in the DNA and RNA. So they can sequence the genetic material. And that is a really powerful tool, because if you can follow the development of genetic expression and change over time and spatially with different organs, then they're hoping they can figure out how human development occurs and how to cure diseases. This is a gigantic, globally coordinated project that has been going on for decades, and it will continue to go on for decades. It includes all the organs in the body: brain, eyeballs, heart, liver, everything, skin. And they need lots of samples of aborted children because they need all during the development trajectory, and they need all different samples from different organs. So different research groups work on different parts. They collate their research into one place, and they're hoping to learn a lot from it. And they have learned a lot from it. It's just that we are heading to a future where very likely there are going to be medical cures and knowledge gained from this massive fetal cell research, fetal tissue research project. And by the time it gets to us, we won't even know whether it was tied to the fetal cell atlas or not. So that's the complicit. If we don't speak up about this now and say, stop doing that, stop funding that, it's going to keep going. It was on the cover of Science magazine in 2022. So it is seen as very productive research. So that's where I'm going to stop. I've been talking about this for years. People sometimes get really depressed. What are we supposed to do? Oh my goodness, I didn't know. I'm never going to use infant formula again. We live in a whole world where probably everything we do is probably unknowingly some kind of remote cooperation and some kind of evil. Can't even drink my water without wondering what was all attached to it before it got here. So there is accepting that, but that doesn't mean stop fighting. That doesn't mean stop speaking up for human dignity, which is the most fundamental thing. Speak up for human dignity in whatever way God puts it in front of you in your life. A nun one time gave a talk on the family, and she gave an image that I think is very useful. She said, those of us fighting for the good and human dignity and family and whatever good it is, we're kind of like doing this. We're kind of like reaching through all the crap and grabbing onto what's good and pulling humanity forward. So your fight, whatever it is part of that pulling us through. So whatever it is that God puts in front of you, do it. Don't be quiet. Sometimes for me, it's just talking. I just keep repeating the same thing until somebody hears it, and that bears fruit. My husband is serving as an expert witness on a couple of federal lawsuits now because of our investigations into this. He more than me counsels people daily on how to navigate their own situation in their own life, whether they're being kicked out of school for not complying, whether they're losing a job. And that's happening a lot now. It's 4 years later, and I think a lot of people are starting to take a stand. So I have seen things change. Thank you for your time, and now we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Trasenkos, for your presentation. And now we will entertain questions from our participants. Our Q&A moderator is Dr. Elizabeth Rex. Dr. Rex is the president of the Children First Foundation, a charitable and educational organization dedicated to promoting adoption as a positive and loving choice for unwanted, unborn children, including unwanted frozen embryos. She has taught bioethics at Holy Apostles College and Seminary and is currently an adjunct professor of Catholic Studies at Sacred Heart University. Dr. Rex has spoken at major conferences and is a frequent contributor to National Catholic Bioethics Quarterly regarding the moral arguments in the embryo adoption debate. She is the author of a soon-to-be-published by En route Books and Media handbook on the moral arguments in the embryo adoption debate. Dr. Rex, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Mahfoud. Very impressive presentations. So we do have some questions, and we're going to begin with Terrence. I believe it's for Dr. Sammut. The data on depression-like behavior in rodents, such as loss of appetite and loss of exploration behavior following an induced abortion, is interesting. I was curious whether rodents ever experience these types of behaviors after normal birth, which might suggest that it is related to falling progesterone levels, or is postpartum depression only something that humans sometimes experience? Dr. Sammut?
Very good question. Let's start from the end. I cannot answer if postpartum depression is something that only humans experience. It needs to be kept in mind that, when we talk about depression-like behavior, there's the physiological aspect and then there's the psychological. Now, let me use the example I mentioned earlier pertaining to miscarriage. So we had a group of rats that was naturally miscarrying. These rats did not show the depression-like behavior that we observed in the abortion group. A lot of people tell me, but humans do. And the reason for that is that we can reflect on the life of that baby. I always mention, we have one, we had one that was miscarried, and to this day, my wife and I will sometimes reflect on, we wonder what he would be doing. So we have that capacity, but when you're studying this, you're looking purely at a physiological level. So with regards to the first part of your question pertaining to whether we observed these in the rats that had normal birth, the very quick answer is no, we did not. We did not see a decrease in food consumption. The food consumption maintained, and we measure grams per 100 gram. And the reason for this is a rat that is bigger will eat more. Therefore, we normalize it by using per 100 grams. So the rats do not show any decrease in food consumption when they are pregnant or even after they give birth. Or interestingly, there was a slight reduction in movement, locomotor activity in the rats that gave birth. However, there was a distinct reason for this. If you look at our paper, we actually have images of this. If you look at the rat that had the abortion, and any of you that have had animals probably have observed this kind of behavior in your sick animal. The rat in the abortion case, the rat was huddled in a corner, unkept coat, totally hunched, and just not eating and not moving around. The rat that had given birth, the reason why she wasn't moving around enough was because she was nursing her 9 to 18 babies. And the reason, when you have a situation like that, the rat clearly is not going to be able to move around. I'm sorry, I'm speaking off the top of my head here. I do not believe that difference was even significant from the normal group. But there was a very specific reason for the slight reduction in the movement of the rats that gave birth, but it was not, no, we did not observe the same behavior as observed in the depression-like behavior that was observed in the abortion rats.
Thank you. We have another question from Julie, also to you, Dr. Sammut. And she says, thank you for your excellent presentation. What is the approximate amount of progesterone used in the abortion reversal pill? Are there any other things used or exclusively progesterone?
I'm going to answer this question cautiously. Please keep in mind I am not a clinician. I'm not a MD. This is something that Dr. Delgado and Dr. Harrison deal with more. I can tell you that I have seen doses of about 200 milligrams, 400 milligrams administered to women, and there are multiple ways of administering this: vaginally, orally, intramuscular, I believe, is another route. However, there are multiple doses that are usually given, and Dr. Delgado covers these protocols in some of his papers. With regards to, is there anything else used, or is it exclusively progesterone? I stand to be corrected, but I believe it is only progesterone. And the major reason for this is because progesterone, if you look at a woman's cycle and the hormones that are released during the cycle, the estrogen and the progesterone, they have their time when they are released. Progesterone is really the hormone that maintains the pregnancy. So progesterone would be the exclusive hormone that is able to reverse the pregnancy because it is absolutely necessary for the maintenance of the pregnancy.
Thank you. We have a question from Max. and it's a side question as to reversals. He asks, in the case of a girl who wanted to be a boy and took all the pills and had her breast removed, then she changed her mind and wanted a breast surgery and was told no. Those drugs she took make it impossible. What can you tell me as to why breasts are impossible? I know this is different to the idea of abortion, but it concerns what these drugs really contain. That the answer is no is found in chemistry. The girl was so depressed because nobody told her. So it cannot be reversed, is the question?
That is the crux of the literally crimes against humanity that the medical community is committing in today's world, because sadly, they cannot be reversed. These are irreversible consequences. You cannot grow breasts back. That's not possible. I don't know how much more information I can give in this regard, but that is the major crime here. That then we are dealing with the fallout of a process where what has been done to these children absolutely cannot be reversed. And the major reason. Okay, maybe I'm seeing a subtle point that you're trying to raise here. Maybe the point here is because of the time that they are being given. You know, you're giving the puberty blockers during a time of major development. If I had to give a lecture regarding the hormonal changes, the neurochemical changes, the neuronal wiring that take place, all of the physical changes that take place during puberty, a major aspect of human development, it would take months of lectures. It's so complex, but this is the reason why they are attacking the point of adolescence, which is the point at which the body is making all of these adjustments, all of these changes, at a point where you're going to literally mess up the body and direct it in a totally different path to what nature would have taken it. So that's where the aspect of irreversibility also comes in.
Thank you. Dr. Trasancos, how is the issue of aborted fetal tissue research tied to the abortion pill issue?
Because they're both abortion, it's both an issue of human dignity. That's underneath it all, but on a more tangible level, they're tied because if you mentioned, Dr. Sammut, that the abortion pill is the predominant way abortions are done now. When women are taking these pills and discarding of their own children at home, then the research community no longer has access to their specimen that they were having access to when the abortions were done in the clinic. And there have actually been concerns raised about, so they're fighting with each other now. The abortion pill is becoming more prominent, but the researchers who use the corpses are having a problem with that because their supply is going down, and they see that being a problem in the future. And it, I'm not going to say it's fun to sit back and watch them contradict each other, but this is the mess that we find ourselves in because of abortion and the lack of human dignity.
Thank you. Julie has a second question. Dr. Sammut, you briefly mentioned post-birth abortion. What does this mean when someone uses this term? What is the timeline for post-birth abortion? And what are the legal ramifications or protections for this?
Interesting question. If I may, can I just add something to what Stacy was just addressing? This is also my concern regarding the direction that some literature is taking with regards to the use of misoprostol only abortion. I am concerned about that aspect because I feel that this leads into what Stacy was covering with regards to living fetuses being born, because you're inducing the contraction, and the baby is more likely to be potentially alive. Getting back to this question with regards to post-birth abortion, this is a play of language that is seen in the scientific literature. It literally is a definition of infanticide. It's using another word for infanticide in the same way that the abortion pill has been referred to as a missed period pill. And it's the same, exactly same drug, same dose. They are utilizing the term post-birth abortion in the hope that infanticide can become more acceptable if the term abortion is fitted in, because of the acceptability of abortion in society. The exact timeline off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I cannot give you. I do not know. You can contact me offline after this presentation. Please feel free to do so, and I can look up the relevant literature and get back to you in that regard. The legal ramifications or protections, well, this is in the same way that I say with regards to institutional review boards, the organizations within institutions, universities that review the ethics of experiments. An institutional review board is only as ethical as the people that make it up. So, viewed in a paper published in China, all kinds of things get accepted by the institutional review boards there, because anything and everything is okay. In some cases, they even do away with ethical administration. There's a case that we had during COVID where we demanded the retraction of a paper because there was no consent requested, and it was anal swabs for testing for COVID, and one of the subjects was a 3-year-old. And it's like, and then the reviewers, the editor came back saying, well, they got retrospective consent, which doesn't exist. That's a nonsense statement. So the legal ramifications, what are they? Well, they depend on the justices that we have, and this is why it is important to understand what is going on politically. Some people say, well, don't talk to me about politics. You talk about science, leave the politics out of it. No, because if we truly believe in the integration of faith and reason involves integrating faith, integrating reason, integrating everything and anything that we do in daily life. Therefore, we need to be aware of what is going on politically and share that and talk about it, including with our students at school and at universities. Despite that some people will object to the separation or bring up the separation of church and state, which is realistically speaking nonsense, because the church, what we learn in our faith, it has significant implications in regards to what goes on in politics. So we need to be speaking out about that, because realistically, if we have judges that are more liberal, that are going to just accept the pseudoscience, let's call it for what it is, that some scientists present to them, laws are going to be passed that are going to allow this. I mean, I showed you the paper with the potassium chloride administration in order to induce infanticide. That wasn't illegal. It was accepted by the institutional review board. It wasn't illegal. So the only way, the legal ramifications of this are that if we do not get our act together, and as Stacy has also addressed, and speak and do what we can do within our power, then the legal system is going to be totally changed and modified so that even what is immoral is legal. And those two, that's where the separation of church and state becomes an important and significant issue, because in a situation like that, now the state is telling the faith what it should do, which is the true definition of separation of church and state. Realistically was there to stop the state from telling the church what to do, not to stop the church from telling the state what to do.
Exactly.
So I hope I've addressed that aspect appropriately.
Julie also has a question for you, Dr. Trasenko. The COVID vaccine. What do you think about the alternative vaccine in Novavax? My understanding is that they did not use fetal testing in the development of it, and they did not use mRNA logic. but instead used the more traditional way to create a vaccine. Unfortunately, although the U.S. initially funded this, in addition to Pfizer and Moderna, in the end, this vaccine was not approved for U.S. use, but is used with success in many other countries. And she gives a link to Novavax.
Yep. And I put, thank you for that question. That was, a lot of people were asking that question. I put a link, if you scroll down in the chat, to our website. We looked into that Novavax when it came out. They do claim their product did not make use of aborted fetal cell lines in development or testing of their vaccine candidate. However, their own scientific literature, where their own people are the authors of the scientific literature, clearly describes an assessment performed by the Novavax development team that describes the use of HEK 293 cell lines. But this is a really good question, because if you want to say which one's better, in this case, Novavax did some test along the development. So development research is messy. You got to test a lot of different things. So in some tests along the way, they did use HEK 293, which is freely, it's not free, but you have to pay for it, but it's easy for labs to get. It is one of the staples of the cell mediums that they do testing in. And so even though it didn't use the RNA, that gets into other questions about safety. No, they didn't use the RNA technique where it uses your own cell machinery to produce a spike protein. They did it the traditional way, where they grew the vaccine in the culture and then use that. So you could say, I'm not a medical doctor, so it's not my specialty, but there were claims that it's safer for that reason, and that makes sense to me. But they did mention, and it's almost like when we go doing this research and looking for it, you don't want to find that needle in the haystack, yet we did, and so there it is. But that is still going to be very different from the vaccines that are grown, like the Johnson & Johnson one, that are actually grown in the fetal cell cultures. That's part of the manufacturing, not even the research or testing. It's part of the manufacturing process. So there's different levels, and that was part of the debate back during COVID, sorting all this out. There were people, Catholics, saying, you got to stop picking on every little thing. If you dig hard enough, you're going to find something wrong with everything. And I agree with that. That's true. Nevertheless, it's just information. If you know that Novavax used in their own development lab, they use HEK 293 along the way, then it's not true. You can say it's 100% pure, but a lot of people still did find that to be the better alternative. It's about information, and the Vatican was very clear on this, and it's the truth. It is a matter of your own prudential judgment. You have to weigh a lot of things when you're deciding whether to vaccinate, what vaccine to use, whether to get the booster. There's a lot of things that go into your own decision. And I keep saying it's not just vaccines. Lots of medicines rely on these cell cultures. So, but we've talked to people they had a daughter who would die without the medicine, and they wanted to know if it was okay to give it. I think in a case like that, absolutely. I mean, it's not your fault. You don't have another choice. So take care of your daughter, but fight the issue when you can later, or do what you can and let other people fight it. So it's just a very multifaceted case. That's a long answer to your question.
David has a question, which I think can be addressed to both of you. Maybe we can start with Dr. Sammut. He asks, how specifically can scientific research be used in lawfare to assist those who are suing government who is attempting to outlaw APR, abortion pill reversal, not because they have disproved the research because of political ideology?
I think this is, as I said, objective data at a preclinical level that nobody can argue is due to religious or social influence. Therefore, it can be part of the hard science evidence that this is a reality. This is a normal process when we talk about cardiac medication, any other medication. This is a normal process that is followed in science, except, of course, in abortion. We did not follow that process. We've just used women as experimental animals for the past 60, 70 years in this regard. So it can be part of the evidence along with clinical data that is submitted. I have never myself been an expert witness. However, from what I've seen of expert witness documents, what they do is they compile a document that includes any kind of evidence that they can find that helps in their argument. And this research can be part of that support.
Dr. Trasancos, would you like to add to that?
I think I was just thinking when you were reading that question, it's another one of these things where it's so messy. It depends on what the lawyers decide they're going to use in making their case. So it's all game. Like the way we do it, I don't have time to get into the whole thing, but my husband and I never imagined we would be running a pro-life nonprofit together in his retirement. But we were open to it when the opportunity came our way, and we're doing it now. And he never expected to be expert witness in trials, yet they're reading the research that he's done and posted on our website, which I just referred to. And the lawyers are judging that is competent to be an expert witness and asking him to speak up. So it depends on what the lawyers are trying to figure out in the case that they have before them. But we have a lot of people who never thought they would end up filing a lawsuit for something like this to stand up for their rights, yet they are. We've had people who've learned how to go to human resources and make a case. So if you have something that you think you can file a lawsuit on, consult with your lawyers, and if they think they can use the research, then use it. It is, like Dr. Sammut said, objective. So there's power in that if it's done right, right?
We have just a few more questions, and we have a question and an observation from Dr. Mahfood, and I'd like to request both of you to respond to it. Does the end ever justify the means is the moral question here. St. Paul has already answered that in Romans chapter 3, verse 8, quote, "And why not say, as we are accused and as some claim we say, that we should do evil that good may come of it. Their penalty is what they deserve." You want to begin, Dr. Sammut?
Sure. I was going to let Stacy begin on this one. I feel she's more in that aspect of the field, but yeah, sure, I'll give my thoughts on this. So I do not believe the end ever justifies the means. No, I don't believe that. However, a caveat to this, and I hope I'm not distracting from the comment, is if an experiment has been done and it has shown data, then we should not use that information because it was done unethically. So we should not support it. We should not support means that are evil. But so let me give a more clear example here. A study was done many years ago, number of years ago, looking at pornography and the parts of the brain that it stimulates. The results of that study, they showed pornography to these people. Do I agree with that ethically? No, because the end does not justify the means. However, the results that they showed that are now published indicate the regulation that takes place of the upper brain, of the lower brain by the upper brain. So do I not use that data because the study was done unethically? No, and I maintain my stance that no, that study was done unethically. But it doesn't stop me from utilizing that data. It should have never been done. But the short answer, I guess, is no, the end does not ever justify the means.
Dr. Trasancos?
Yes, and that is, it gets into the nuances of the bioethical question here too, because we had people making the same argument. There are data banks of information that was obtained using corpses from abortion. And that's what the fetal cell atlas is doing. So there's this bank sitting there, and then you come to the question and you want to use the data because you're trying to do something good. Do you use that data or not? And so people come down in different places on that question. Some say no, because if you use the data, then you're in some way supporting the scandal. So I'm not saying, I don't even know where I fall on that, but it's there. It's something that people have to face, because I have had, when my husband and I would do these panels with people in support of fetal tissue research, and we were the ones opposing it, the people in support of it said, yeah, you want to look all sanctimonious and disagree with it now because the ends don't justify the means. Meanwhile, you're going to let us go off and do the research, and then your people are going to use that research down the road. And it's like, because you can't, you don't want to be doing that either. And so it really is a question, what do we do in the moment? So some people say nothing. I want nothing to do with any of it. And if I accidentally have something to do with it because I didn't know, I can't fix that. But going forward, I won't have anything to do with it going forward. But then you have the question, like you were saying about pornography. How can you just not use that data? Because good can come from using what you know. So it's just there. This is a lot of bioethical questions get this way. They're gray, and you don't know. You have to learn to use prudential judgment in the situation that's in front of you. There is no magic bullet except prayer.
Well, thank you both. I have one final comment, not a question, from Dr. Craig Trzynski. Excellent seminar. Thank you, Stephen, Stacy, Elizabeth, and Sebastian. God bless. Dr. Mahfood?
That wraps up our Q&A. Thank you everyone for your participation in this webinar. Thank you especially to Dr. Stephen Sammut and Dr. Stacy Trzynski for your excellent presentations, and to Dr. Elizabeth Rex for leading the Q&A. Thank you to Father Peter Stravinskas and Julie Butler for leading us in prayer. In conclusion, our closing prayer will be led by Julie Butler. Currently, Julie is a Pontifex University Doctor of Theology candidate and a University of Steubenville Spiritual Director candidate. She has completed an MA in Theology at Holy Apostles College and Seminary and a BS in Speech Communications at the University of Utah.
Saint Thomas Aquinas, please pray for us. Give to me, O Lord God, a watchful heart, which no capricious thought can lure away from you. Give to me a noble heart, which no unworthy desire can debase. Give to me a resolute heart, which no evil intention can divert. Give to me a stalwart heart, which no tribulation can overcome. Amen.